It's not just Democrats. It is Republicans on Capitol Hill. It is conservative media figures ripping this deal. Given your experience, your expertise, what's your take on what we know about it so far?
Well, the Substack I wrote yesterday was called Defeat, and you can dress it up any way you want, you can spin it any way you want. But what it represents is a massive falling away from our articulated goals, things like regime change, unconditional surrender, and so forth. The sequencing of all this, Willie, gives Iran a lot of rewards up front. Particularly financial rewards, which among other things strengthen this regime. Among the big losers in this, and we can talk about the others, are the Iranian people, because this regime now is entrenched far more than it was. A lot of the big issues, as you just have been kicked down the road, particularly the nuclear issue, which, according to the president, was the more than anything else the reason for the war, even though there was nothing new about the Iranian nuclear program. It doesn't even refer, as you just heard in that bit, about ballistic missiles or Iranian support for groups like Hamas or Hezbollah or the Houthis, which is another way of saying Israel's concerns were totally ignored. And the irony there is hard to miss, since it was Israel that pressed so hard for this war in the first place. So essentially, we've paid an enormous amount, Willie, to get the Strait of Hormuz open for 60 days toll-free. And the agreement actually talks about Iran having the right to consider putting tolls on and other arrangements after 60 days. So, I'm beyond hard-pressed to make the case that this is either a good agreement or one that in any way justifies this war of choice.
And of course, the Strait of Hormuz was open on February 28th when this war started, so hard to measure that as a victory either. Richard, what about the money? We've talked about this proposed $300 billion investment fund paid for by Gulf states, the president said, but also perhaps by some private companies in the United States if they want to invest as well. The sanctions waivers, the ability to sell oil openly and freely again, which will be a windfall for Iran. What does that mean to the Iranian regime to have all that money flowing back into the country?
Well, it's a windfall even without this $300 billion fund. That's essentially to be established. But you've got the return of frozen assets. You've got the easing of sanctions, which, among other things, when Iran sells its oil now, it will not have to sell at a discounted price. So it has really two big effects, Willie. One is that, as I mentioned, it strengthens this Iranian regime. The Achilles heel of this Iranian regime is its economic mismanagement. And what this does is buy it a lot of time economically. And then secondly, a lot of that money can be used, among other things, for rebuilding Hezbollah, rebuilding Hamas, rebuilding missiles, rebuilding drone factories, and so forth. So in a funny sort of way, we're going to be providing the means for Iran to reestablish its ability to threaten not just its own people, but Israel and its Arab neighbors.
Republican lawmakers, most of them privately, are appalled by this deal. They're saying so. Many who've supported Donald Trump through almost everything appalled. Some of them saying it out loud as well, voicing their reservations on the Trump administration's agreement to end the fighting, or at least to pause the fighting in Iran. In an interview yesterday, Republican chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Tom Cotton of Arkansas, criticized the provision lifting American sanctions on Iran's oil exports.
I do have concerns that certain aspects of this deal are a step in the wrong direction. For instance, we're going to lift sanctions on Iran's oil exports right away. And based on their pre-war rates of production and recent prices for a barrel of oil, you're looking at somewhere between $150 and $200 million a day. So that's $4.5 billion to $6 billion every single month. That's a lot of money. And we know that this terrorist revolutionary regime is not going to spend that money on daycares or on hospital. They're going to use it to rebuild their drone stockpiles, their missiles, to fund Hamas and to fund Hezbollah.
Meanwhile, the Republican chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, Roger Wicker of Mississippi, blasted that proposed $300 billion fund to rebuild Iran, writing in a statement it would, quote, make Iran's payoff under President Obama's 2015 deal look like a pittance. by comparison. So, Jonathan Lemire, there you have high-ranking, prominent Republican senators speaking out in very specific ways against the deal made by the president. Has the White House absorbed in the last 24 hours all of this criticism? Again, not from us, but from Republicans, from the Wall Street Journal, from the New York Post, and all over the conservative media. And are they prepared to do anything about it? Is anything changing?
I mean, they hear it. They're not happy about it, but they're trying to just blow past it. It's another sign of just how desperate they are to just put this whole matter behind them. We saw, attempts to spin this yesterday from the president on Truth Social, when he spoke briefly to reporters. I know he spoke to Mark Caputo from Axios. I believe we're talking to a little later about that. We had J.D. Vance, who's become sort of the face of these negotiations of late. Go to the White House briefing room yesterday and talk about it. And I think there are a couple things here. Now, behind closed doors, there are some in the administration who are concerned that Iran won't hold up their end of the deal. And that's a reasonable concern because Iran has never held up their end of the deal. So that's part of this. But I think there is a recognition, they're not going to say it publicly, that this was nowhere near what they thought was going to happen when this war started. And they are hearing these Republicans, slam every piece of this. None of the president's war aims, that he outlined, in the conflict's first days were accomplished. I also wrote this week about this was a defeat for President Trump. Makes him and the nation look weaker on the global stage. So we are going to see they're trying to spin this. They're going to keep trying to do that. But then I think they're going to try to just move on. That's how this, Willie, as we well know, that's how the Trump administration has always worked, in particular in the political shop in the West Wing and the president himself. He believes he has tremendous faith in his ability to change the topic of conversation. If there are bad headlines, he throws something else out there. He tries to distract. He tries to move on to the next thing. And they think that in the coming days, they'll be able to do that as well. They're more concerned about the politics right now than they are about the long-term geopolitical ramifications. Now, that's to their mistake. Those ramifications are real, and the world's going to feel it for a long time. But they are trying to just move on to the next story.
To your point, the Epstein files were dominating the headlines on the day that this war started. The president does like to change the subject. You mentioned Vice President J.D. Vance. He's no longer traveling to Switzerland for negotiations today with Iran, raising questions about the next phase of talks between our two countries. The White House cited difficult logistics for negotiations in announcing the postponement of that trip. The Swiss Foreign Ministry also said today's planned talks between the U.S., Iran, Qatar, and Pakistan would be pushed to a later date. Earlier yesterday, the vice president briefed reporters at the White House on the tentative deal with Iran, staunchly defending the agreement through a series of often misleading claims. Vance asserted lifting oil sanctions on Iran was, quote, not a new benefit for the country. But as the New York Times points out, under the preliminary deal, Iran will be able to sell its oil for more and to a wider array of buyers. The vice president also claimed the financial benefits to Iran will only be available if the country fully complies. But the agreement states the U.S. will unfreeze Tehran's assets and release restricted funds, quote, under the implementation of this MOU. Here's more of what Vance had to say at the White House yesterday.
The simple fact is that the only way the Iranians get any of those resources, not a single penny, by the way, from the United States of America under any circumstances, but the only way that they would ever get any benefit of the bargain is if they comply fully and change their behavior. And so you really have a win-win situation for the United States of America. If the Iranians don't change their behavior, their military and their nuclear program is still destroyed. The Obama nuclear deal allowed enrichment. Ours will not. The Obama deal allowed the accumulation of stockpiled weapons-grade material. Ours is actually leading to the destruction of that stockpile of enriched material. So there are many differences. The Obama deal gave them over $1 billion of American money. This deal gives them $0 of American money. So a lot of substantive differences, but I think the most important differences are where we're coming at it from a position of strength and the fact that our Gulf Coast partners love this deal.
A lot to talk through there. First, though, Iran's supreme leader issued his first reaction to this agreement. In a statement read by state media, the leader, who's still not been seen in public since he was wounded in a strike at the beginning of the war, seemed to authorize his officials to hold direct talks with the U.S., but added face-to-face discussions do not mean, quote, acceptance of the enemy's position. The supreme leader also added he believes President Trump signed the deal, quote, out of desperation. So Caddy K, basically this memorandum of understanding opens the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before the war began, and opens the door to nuclear talks, which President Trump has sort of refocused as the central question over the last couple of months, moved on from regime change and some of the other goals and said they can't have a nuclear weapon. It's unclear if Iran's actually ready to have serious nuclear talks.
Yeah, I mean, and remember that those nuclear talks were also going on February the 27th before we started bombing. So we really are back to the status quo ante with a kind of new element where J.D. Vance and this crack team of negotiators seem to feel that they've got a regime that has been calling death to America for the last 47 years to decide to abandon all of that and become part of the normal operating world and part of the kind of Western economies. I mean, I think that is the most, Richard, one of the most fanciful bits of what we've been hearing, particularly from the vice president for the last few days, was that somehow over the last 4 months, Iran has changed its mind, whereas everything that I hear from people on Capitol Hill and in the diplomatic community is that the intelligence is pointing in the other direction, that you have an IRGC which is now more hardened and entrenched in its position as the leaders of the regime in Iran, not less. So where do you buy this Iran is the new Switzerland line?
If I were Switzerland, I'd be offended. There's zero evidence whatsoever that Iran is more moderate. If anything, Iran has been rewarded for this aggressive behavior, whether it's towards its own people or towards its neighbors. It's being rewarded for standing up to the United States. And what the vice president just said, can I just say, the agreement, as everybody knows, simply says we're going to negotiate nuclear issues, other than Iran is given the pledge of intentions. Not that that means anything, that they're not going to have nuclear weapons.